Information is the resource that controls every other resource in a conflict scenario, where the threat is moving, which route is still open, which area just lost water, which checkpoint is processing civilians, and which one is not. Without accurate current information, every other preparation you have made operates blind. Your stored food does not tell you when to leave. Your evacuation route does not update itself when the road it uses gets blocked. Your shelter decision cannot self-correct when the threat geometry changes overnight. And the single infrastructure layer that modern civilians depend on for all of that information, the internet, is among the first systems to become unreliable in any serious conflict or grid disruption scenario. Not because the cables get cut immediately, because the power that runs the servers, the towers, and the routing infrastructure fails, congests, or gets deliberately disrupted before most people have finished processing that the situation is real. Subscribe to Disaster Ready HQ right now and never miss what actually keeps you informed when the feed goes dark. Stay until the end, because the fifth method is the one that has provided the most tactically accurate civilian information in every documented conflict zone, and it requires no device, no power, and no infrastructure of any kind. Here is the information architecture failure that kills unprepared families in the opening phase of a conflict. They had one information source, the phone. Everything they knew about the world came through one device on one network dependent on one infrastructure layer. When that layer degraded, their information did not degrade proportionally. It did not slow down or become partially available. It stopped completely. And a family with no information in a dynamic threat environment is a family making decisions on the last thing they knew, which may have been accurate 6 hours ago and is certainly not accurate now. Real information resilience is not a faster phone or a better signal. It is a layered architecture of independent sources that do not share a single point of failure. Here are the 5 layers. The first method is battery-powered AM and FM radio. This is the foundational civilian information tool in every conflict and disaster scenario ever documented, and the one most consistently absent from modern households because it has been replaced by the phone. A battery-powered radio receives broadcast signals from transmitters that operate on independent power infrastructure, frequently including generator and battery backup specifically designed for emergency continuity. AM signals travel further than FM, penetrate buildings more effectively, and carry emergency broadcasts across distances that make them receivable across entire regions even when local infrastructure has failed. A basic battery-powered AM and FM radio costs under $20. A set of spare batteries costs $3. That $40 combination gives you access to emergency broadcasts, military and government communications intended for civilian populations, and regional news from transmitters outside the affected area. It works when every other information source has failed. Buy it before you need it. Store it with the batteries already installed and a spare set taped to the back. The second method is shortwave radio. Where AM and FM carry regional information, shortwave carries international. In a conflict scenario where domestic broadcast infrastructure has been compromised, damaged, or captured, international shortwave transmitters broadcasting into the affected region carry the information that domestic sources are no longer able or permitted to provide. The BBC World Service, Voice of America, and multiple international broadcasters maintain shortwave transmissions specifically for conflict-affected civilian populations. A shortwave-capable receiver costs between $30 and $60. It requires no subscription, no network, and no infrastructure beyond a working battery. In Sarajevo, in Grozny, in every sustained siege scenario with documented civilian accounts, shortwave radio was the information source that provided civilians with the most accurate picture of the overall situation when every domestic source had been compromised. The people who had one knew what was happening. The people who did not knew only what they could see from their window. The third method involves pre-downloaded offline maps and documents. This is not a live information source. It is the information you collected before the internet died, stored on your device in a form that does not require connectivity to access. Offline maps of your region downloaded to your phone via applications that support offline mode give you navigation capability that functions without cell signal, without GPS data connectivity, and without any live infrastructure. Pre-downloaded emergency protocols, medical references, contact lists, and regional documents stored as offline files on your device mean that the loss of internet connectivity does not also mean the loss of every piece of reference information you would need to make decisions in the first week. Do the downloads today. Verify they are accessible in airplane mode before you need to access them without a choice. The information you saved before the infrastructure failed is the only information you own. Everything else you are just borrowing from a system that is now unavailable. The fourth method is the designated out-of-area contact as an information relay. Your pre-established out-of-area contact is not only a communication tool, they are an information asset. A person outside the affected area has access to the full international coverage of your situation, the overhead view that people inside the affected area cannot access because they are inside it. A single successful outbound communication to your out-of-area contact through whatever channel briefly becomes available, a working landline, a brief moment of cell connectivity, or a text that sends on the third attempt retrieves not just a status confirmation, but a current intelligence picture of the overall situation from someone who has been watching it from outside. Designate this contact before the situation begins. Brief them on what information you will need. Establish the check-in protocol. The contact who knows you need route information, threat movement updates, and border status is the contact who has been collecting that information since the situation began because they knew you would eventually get a message through. The fifth method is the people around you. Every person who has moved through the threat environment in the last 2 hours carries fresher intelligence than any broadcast source available to you. The neighbor who just came in from the street knows which direction the last vehicles were moving. The family that arrived from 3 blocks east knows whether that route is passable. The person sheltering in your building who came from the other side of the city this morning has a ground-level picture of what exists between you and the direction you are considering moving. Human intelligence from people in the same environment is the most current, most locally specific, and most tactically actionable information available in a conflict scenario. It is also the most variable in reliability. Triangulate everything. 1 source is a report. 3 sources saying the same thing is intelligence. The discipline of collecting information from every human contact, filtering it for consistency, and updating your situational picture continuously from the people physically present in your environment is the oldest intelligence method in human history. It requires no device, no power, and no infrastructure. It requires only the habit of asking the right questions to every person who has seen something you have not. Here is what these 5 methods add up to when they are all in place simultaneously: a layered information architecture with no single point of failure. If the internet is down, the radio works. If the radio signal is jammed or compromised, the shortwave reaches outside the affected area. If the devices are dead, the out-of-area contact carries the overhead picture until connectivity returns. If every broadcast source is unavailable, the people around you are carrying live ground truth from the environment you are about to make decisions in. The family with this architecture does not go dark when the internet dies. It shifts sources. It triangulates. It continues making informed decisions in an environment where every other family is operating on the last thing their phone told them before the signal dropped. Build the architecture before the feed goes dark. After it does, you can only use what you already built. Comment below and tell me, right now, if the internet went down tonight and stayed down, which of these 5 methods could you actually use? Give me a number between 0 and 5. That number is your current information resilience and the only honest starting point.